can get started. So thank you so much, everyone, for being part of today's webinar, which is part of the CX community for Europe, Middle East, and Africa for the Customer Centricity World Series. This edition of the webinar is sponsored by GemSeek, and the topic is creating value for the customers with the customers. My name is Mark Hamill. I'm the CEO of Architect Global, and today we hope to have a fantastic session, as I said, with our sponsors at GemSeek, who are long-standing friends of the awards in Europe and for the World Series as well. Quick agenda for today. We'll have some welcome slides, which we're working on now, introduction to the speakers and the topic, and then please be mindful, this is an open session. This is not one-way communication. We want you to get involved. We want you to ask questions in the chat, which we will come back to round about the half-hour mark. And then also we will ask you to turn on your cameras and ask questions throughout as well, directly to the panel. As mentioned, this is part of the Customer Centricity World Series with the registration deadline tomorrow. Anyone that wants to get involved in that can participate and enter 3 categories for free. Time-wise, you would have plenty of time to fill in your entry forms up until the first week of February, so don't worry about that. More information is on the website there. And a bit of housekeeping, we will kick off with a panel discussion with our 3 speakers today. And until we open it up to the floor, please keep yourself on mute. And then any questions that you do have, please put them in the chat. And as I said, we will do our best to come back to those towards the end of the session. And of course, have fun and enjoy the session. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers today. We have Ivaylo Yorgov, who's the Managing Director of GemSeek, Stuart McGown, who's the Head of Marketing, Insights and Analytics at Philips, and Stephan Ariesen, who's the VP Northern Europe at Medallia. So without putting anyone in the spotlight to begin with, but I'd like to hand over to Stuart to start the introductions, and over to you, Stuart.
Thanks very much, Mark. Stuart McGown, I'm based here in Amsterdam. I head up Marketing Insights and Analytics at Philips. So what does that entail? Well, we do a lot of the market research, consumer and customer insight work across our businesses. We handle all the knowledge management, competitive intelligence, and all the typical things you might expect from an insights or a research organization. And a big chunk of our work is around customer experience. So we put a lot of effort in there on that over the last few years. And so really happy to be here to share our experiences with that and get a discussion going on the way forward with Ivo and Stephan and everybody on the call today. So,
brilliant. Thank you, Stuart. And Ivo, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, Stuart, for joining us, and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure really to be here with so many people interested in improving customer experience and making the lives of their customers a little bit better. My name is Ivaylo. I'm one of the managing directors at GemSeek. We're a customer experience analytics company, and what I do at GemSeek is that I lead the customer success teams. So that basically means the teams that do the magic behind all of the projects that we execute. So that includes market research, text analytics, and very advanced stuff in the field of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. I have about, 15 years of experience in customer experience. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to update that to close to 20. Unfortunately, because of age, not because of experience, but it's much closer to 20 now, I realized recently. And I recently just published my first book on customer experience management. So that's about me, I think.
Thank you so much, Ivo, and thank you for hosting this today as well. And over to you, Stephan.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Stephan Ariesen, Area VP for Northern Europe at Medallia. And actually what we do is we partner with all kinds of companies to make their products and services loved by their customers and their employees. And we deliver a broad variety of technology, but also knowledge and consulting work. We partner with GemSeek on doing this. And one of the customers that we do this for is also Philips. There's many more. So we are building hubs in the Nordics, but also in Benelux to really get close to our customers and really to create brands that are loved in the market so they can grow faster than any other brand. That's us.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephan, and thanks for joining us today. And I guess just to kick it off with the topic and what it means to you, so I'll pass back to Stuart. So the topic being creating value for the customers with the customer. What would you say that means to you?
It's a big question. If you look at the competitive landscape, you realize that very often your offering is very similar to your competitors. I mean, we all, no matter which company you work for, we all like to think, we've got something unique, we've got something different, we've got something far better than the competition. But quite often that is almost imperceptible to a customer or a consumer. And the thing that can really separate you from the rest of the pack, I believe, is customer experience. Particularly in B2B businesses, but any kind of relationship that you might have with your consumer or your customer, I think it's that experience which is the most memorable part. That's the touch points that you have, the support that you get. If it's a frictionless experience that you get, that's what makes the difference. So I think that's super important. The other thought that I have on this is, and it might be a bit of a strange analogy, but it's a little bit like my tennis game. I never win tennis because I'm good at tennis. I always win a tennis match because my opponent has dropped the ball or they've made a mistake. And I think customer experience is a little bit like that. How can you make sure that you're always delivering, that you're not making mistakes, that you're solid, you're giving people what they need when they need it? And I think that's why it's so important to measure it and to have that kind of feedback system in place to make sure you're not dropping the ball and that you continue to win your tennis match. Because to imagine that you're going to have something that is so different in such a competitive market, it's something we all strive for, but I think if we're honest with ourselves, I think the reality is the competitive advantage is coming from customer experience, and you've got to have a feedback system in place in order to make sure you're delivering every day in a consistent manner. That would be my first thoughts on the topic.
Excellent. Thank you, Stuart. And Ivo, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna probably expand a little bit on what Stuart said about the imperceptible differences. And I think he's exactly right. We oftentimes think, we're better than the competitors and so on, but at the end of the day, it's not us who decide. It's the customers who decide. And the customers decide when they actually put what they have purchased to good use. It's not like just purchasing it. I might buy a lot of stuff, but what do I do with all that stuff? And a microwave oven doesn't create value. It's not. Companies often say, we deliver value by doing this product. The value itself is actually cooking dinner for my family. The value itself could be being a very good father, for example. But the value, it's not like in the microwave. The microwave is just the tool that customers use to kind of create solutions for all these problems in their lives. How am I going to be a better husband, a better father, and so on. So it's up to the customers to decide, I think, how much value does the product bring. And I think from that perspective, it's exactly as Stuart said, staying close to the customers after you have actually made the sale. So it's about how do you work with them, how do you support them in the process of them creating value instead of thinking that you create value. And I think here it's like solving their problems and solving them proactively even, or helping them by educating them. And I know that Philips do a lot of things in this area because of the beard and all that. I've got the tools, and I was initially like, so how do I do this thing? And I don't know how to trim my beard and stuff like that. But then Philips also offer videos, and they say, a good practice is to do this and that. And that's actually creating value with the product. They're helping me create value with the product, because a beard trimmer doesn't create value on its own. It's me who create the value with it. So that was probably kind of a long answer to a short but very difficult question.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have a Philips one as well, so totally with you on that one.
Great to hear. We're doing something right.
Just reminded me.
Just to add to what Ivo was saying, I think there's this classic And I'm sure we've seen it all over LinkedIn. There's this classic survey where you've got a survey where 80% of CEOs said their customers were enthralled with what their offering was, so they thought they were great. But when the survey was done with the customers, only 20% agreed. So there's this huge disparity gap in terms of customer experience. 20% of customers saying they're getting a great product, great experience, versus 80% of company CEOs think they're delivering it. And I think that's why it's very important to have this kind of feedback loop in place where you're actually delivering that sort of mirror to a company or a business to say, this is what's really happening. And to highlight some of the opportunities and the insights that businesses can build on, just slightly the videos and the experience that Ivo talked about, how to really enhance the use of the product and so that you get the most of it, because you're right, you're the one that's getting the value from it.
Sorry. I really liked also your comment, Stuart, about that the customer experience is the main differentiator in the market. And I think if we take a step back, what's happening these days, right, in the financial climate that we're in, companies are used to grow by investing, by acquiring companies, by loans, right? But the cost of capital has risen, right, through tremendous levels that we haven't seen in decades at this level. And what we'll also be seeing the upcoming years is that companies will try to differentiate more on an experience level. And it's in essence continuously exceeding expectations, as you're saying, regardless if you're collaborating with your customers on a website or in store or in a service environment. They're exceeding they're expecting the same quality, the same quickness, the same knowledge, the same everything. And companies need to be more and more on top of this, because indeed this is going to be the differentiating thing in the market when there is no or less opportunity to acquire and grow inorganically. So I really like that comment. But then, yeah, how do you do that, right? That's the thing.
Absolutely.
Stephan, I think also like this cross-pollination of expectations, if you will, because I think one of the points that you were alluding to, like we're so used to some companies delivering great customer experience and others not so much, and so on. So we learn from completely different industries, and we start expecting it from places that it didn't exist before. I'm gonna give you an example. Like if you think that Spotify or a company like that delivers great customer experience, you start expecting that from companies like Philips or Signify or whatever it is, you know, even in B2B businesses. So we kind of learn as customers what good customer experience looks like, and we start expecting it in all of the products and services that we buy. And I think that also applies to B2B as well, because we talk about B2B, but then at the end of the day, it's people working in B2B companies, they're consumers in their private lives. So I think they also start to learn, you know, what to expect from companies. So in that sense, from the customer experience perspective, your competitors might be a really diverse set of companies in terms of customer experience. So my expectations from let's say, I don't know, my local supermarket is very influenced by Spotify, for example, which is in a lot of ways, I think, really odd.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's still an emotional decision, isn't it, for the people that are buying products, right? So, yeah, if they're attached to a certain way of doing things, absolutely, totally agree with that. And I guess one of the questions you mentioned there about expectations, or in this case, value. So, how do you truly establish what, even on an individual basis, like a customer would see as value in their experience? Is there anyone that would like to start with that one? It's Stuart.
Yeah, sorry, I just see Stephan leaning in, but I'm happy to take the question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the question in the chat from David Haggerty. So it's slightly different to the one that you asked, but in the face of increasing business costs, how can the value of investing in customer experience be best articulated? And I think there are two elements to that. I think one, you know, for any kind of commercial enterprise, you've got to be able to put a monetary figure on that. Now, people have very mixed views on that, but one of the ways we've been successful in quantifying the importance of customer experience is to be able to link it through to, well, what is the cost of losing customers? What does that mean? And if you look at, a typical way a business needs to grow, there are two ways. You win new business with new customers. You either expand with existing customers or you win new customers. And the other area, it's with your biggest customers. It's very difficult to actually grow with them because they've invested a lot with you anyway, but the risk is in losing them. So what we have done at Philips is we've quantified what that risk is. What does it mean if we actually don't deliver great customer experience to those customers? What is the cost to us of losing those customers? And that's quite a scary figure. I bet if any business were to make that calculation, you would get a shock at what the risk is in losing some of your biggest clients. But all businesses are about growth. And the way to grow that is also to grow your reputation and to make sure that people want to work with you and that you deliver on that. And that's where the customer experience piece comes in as well. So we also look at how do you grow that sort of long tail of clients and potential clients as well. Now, bringing it back to the question for you, it's how do you deliver that value for the customer? I mean, we're using, and I know there are many metrics, but what we have done is we've set up a number of touch points, feedback loops, and we're big fans of the NPS. And I know there's a lot of discussion and debate around whether it's the NPS or any other metric, but we felt it was really important to have something that was pretty simple, and something that gave us the why as well. So you get a metric, and you can argue whether it's centigrade or Fahrenheit, whatever metric you're choosing, just be consistent. But the important part is to look at the why, in the own words of the customer. And that is tremendously valuable because we also see, customers who are huge fans of ours, they're giving us a 9 or a 10 on the NPS scale. When I personally read their verbatims, of course, we've got really sophisticated tools, using Medallia. We've got built-in AI to help us segment the different types of feedback. But when you read their feedback, you can realize that even a customer that's giving you a 9 or 10 has got some pretty serious constructive feedback for you. And it's important to listen to those people because they are vested in the relationship with you. Obviously, you have the risk of losing them if you don't deliver. So it's important to listen to everybody, not just acting on some of the customers that perhaps have an issue and are giving you a 1 or a 2 because you've dropped the tennis ball, as I mentioned at the start of the call, but also those customers who are really fans of your company, of your product and your offering. You've got to listen to them because they'll be telling you stuff that can lift your experience and build what you've got. And I think that's some of the most valuable part. That's the most valuable value from my point of view in what you get from asking customers.
Sorry. Yeah, maybe to complement that, Stuart. So I think there's a few things that are important. First of all, you need to be able to understand or listen to your customers, right? So what kind of signals or what kind of feedback are you actually collecting from which channels? Because customers are engaging with companies in more and more different ways, right? It's no longer just via surveys, but also phone, text, social media, emails. They're calling into the contact center. They're tweeting. Some of them do video feedback messages. So there's a lot of complexity. Are you able to capture all of that? Then the AI that you're saying, right? To what extent are you able to make sense of what people are saying and differentiate what's really impactful and what's not? And I like that you also brought up text analytics, right? Because we see more and more in the market that text analytics is really like a compass. It can peel the onion and it can say, okay, if we have an NPS of, let's say, plus 30, then there is a plus 5 impact of all the customer feedback across all the different channels. That's the responsiveness of our staff. But there is also a minus 5 impact that potentially could come from the knowledge of our staff. So if we train our people to give higher quality answers, still fast, right? Then our NPS goes up with 5 points. And companies are doing this more and more. So AI really to understand what's being said at a higher level, but also understand how valuable this really is to your company and where you can have most impact as a CX or a market and analytics leader is really important. But then the third component is doing something with all of these insights, because we see still companies that are analyzing, but it's all about taking action. So it's about taking action to the individual customer to change the experience. If you're able to reach out to an individual customer in the moment that they are doing this business with you, then it's 50% likely that you can turn around a negative response into a positive response. But also on a higher level, what does all the feedback mean for our processes, for our products, for our service, for innovation, for which markets we're gonna go into, for everything, right? So and that also means that you have to spread this throughout the company, right? Because this customer feedback is at the heart of everything. It should drive decisions, not just of insights and analytics or just of marketing, but also of product development, of sales, of the whole company. And if you do that, and I'm coming back to the question, then there's been a Forrester study about the value of this. And there were 6 customers that were included in the study. And the payback, if you launch such a program, is in less than 6 months for all these customers. And the ROI in 3 years is 6 times the investment. So about monetary value, that's really, really big. But it's the simple things like, are you able to reach out to individual customers after a potential negative experience? Are you able to improve your business, your company based on what's really important from your customer perspective? And I think that's really where the value is.
And I think, Stephan, what you hinted towards is also kind of this data fusion and data integration. So we data in a lot of ways is not a problem in itself, because there is enough data. What I've encountered very frequently is that it sits in different places within organizations, and different teams don't have access to the whole picture. And I think that's going to be vital in the future, because establishing what is the value of customer experience initiatives. Yes, it is a lot about data. Yes, it is a lot about artificial intelligence and all the analytics, but the analytics are in place, the capabilities are there. What I've noticed very much is that it's just that how do you integrate all the pieces together? How do you get a kind of this holistic view of the customer? What do they do? Do they pay the bills on time and so on? And I've noticed that the companies that actually really succeed in that have a very good kind of integrated system, really data system for their customers, in which everything sits in one place. It's fairly democratized. Of course, data privacy and all that's an important element of it. Not everyone in the company should have access to all the data, but at least some people should, I think. And I've noticed that that's a huge challenge. So maybe, Stuart, if I can pass you the ball, how do you solve that challenge? Because I know that you do a lot of stuff, and you mentioned that you've done this kind of analysis.
Yeah, and I'll try and weave it into one of the questions I'm seeing popping up in the chat here as well. So, I mean, just to step back, I mean, we started off several years ago, and like many companies, I suspect, you start off with some sort of customer feedback on service. It's transactional, it's important. And from there, you sort of grow. You start to do your customer journey mapping, you understand where that's going, and you put in touch point feedback surveys across the board. So we're very lucky, I mean, working with a partner like Medallion. I think these days with the technology, you have a kind of a cloud-based solution so that you can make sure, as you say, you can control things across the whole globe. So I'm globally responsible. So we ask the same survey, but in different languages, to different customer groups at different touch points across the whole world. But what's very important is you direct that so that the colleagues in the local country have the ownership, have the ability to see what their customers are saying, and they can do something about it. Now, what is important, and I'll try and link this to the question I see in the chat from Sasha, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. What do you do when you don't have all of the data? I mean, typically per year, we would survey around anywhere between 10 and 20% of our customer base. And the question then becomes, well, what about the other sort of 80 or 90% of your customers? And what we've been doing is actually also building up kind of a data lake of operational touch points. And that's when you start to link, well, what are the customers saying? So those sort of 10 or 20% of your customer base, you know how they feel, they know what they're saying, you know the why behind what they're saying, but how do you interpolate that with your entire customer base? Well, typically you may have operational data for all of your customers. And some of the work that we've done, we've started to link it to things like on the B2B side, how many engineers do you have? How many visits do you have? What's the uptime of the machines? How much training of support have we given, etc. Even the number of campaigns. So you even see campaigns, it's not just about selling the product. Actually, campaigns help build awareness and interest and learning in some of your offerings as well. And what we've been able to do is actually empirically show where customer experience actually leads to an uptick in customer retention and in win rates even for customers. So that's one of the areas that we're really proud of, and how you link that to some pretty hard business metrics, which always attract the attention of your exco or your board of management. So that's a great link. But the other thing is just building that, and I think democratizing it through a kind of a cloud-based customer feedback system is super important. The other thought I got is, how do you deal with getting action? I think that was one of the other questions I saw in the chat. Well, what we're doing is we're triaging the feedback. I think that's probably one of the best. And recognizing these questions, I think we've all, at Philips, we've asked ourselves exactly the same questions over the years, and step by step we've kind of worked to solve them. The thing that we do is triage the information. So of all of that feedback, and to Stephan's point, it's also getting it into the right hands of the right teams of people that can do something with it. Because a customer, as you say, it may be something that's very, it can be solved very quickly. Maybe it was an interaction with an agent on the phone, or it may be something inherent to the product, and you've got to get that into the colleagues that are working in innovation. So, there are some things that can be solved very quickly. So get it into the hands of those people that can act on it. Maybe the key account manager, maybe somebody in service, or it may be something that you might want to get into the hands of people in marketing because they're developing new campaigns or new ideas. Wherever it is, get it into the hands of the people that can do something with it. And I think that probably leads me on to the last point, which is culture, because all of this rests on the culture of your company. Your company needs to want to be obsessed with what the customer is saying and doing. And I think that's very, very important. So you've got to have that sort of top-down leadership where everybody, and at Philips, we have a mantra, we call it customer first. So we are very obsessed about what we do with the customer and how we solve their problems. And that's really important. And I've seen it at other companies. I've been lucky enough to work at companies like TomTom, where the managing director used to sit and listen to customers every month. You should spend an afternoon in a call center listening and even taking calls from customers. Working at Canon, you see, in Japanese culture companies, there is an obsession with quality and customer centricity. So you've got to make sure that you can stimulate that within your company as well, and show that your customer experience measurement is a facet of that and helps enable that as well. Yeah, I'll hold off now and let's
fantastic.
after the discussion.
I love how you also make the bridge between customer experience, because it's not just making people feel good, right? Making your customers feel good, but it's actually about collecting insights, data, right? So it's about collecting feedback and opinions and what could have been improved from people in a text or a speech format or whatever kind of format you want, and actually doing something, taking action about it, right? So it's about much more than this. Yeah. Maybe to also jump in and to Sasha's point, right? What do you do when accounts or customers are silent? What we see more and more in the market is that there's also this rise of the concept of digital experience analytics. I mean, customers might not fill in a survey or might not respond, but they are looking on your website. So you can see, where are they looking, where are they not looking? For instance, an example of how this could lead to value is Vodafone. So Vodafone had a button on the website which allowed customers to B2B, but also B2C, to get in contact with chat or with a real-time agent on the phone. But they found that this button was hardly clicked at all, right? So they couldn't understand why this wasn't clicked. But then when they looked at digital experience analytics, they found out that their visitors to the website were not scrolling down to where the button was. So they did a really simple thing. They pushed the button upwards on the website so that more people could see it. And then what happened is that it turned from one of the lowest clicked items on the website to one of the highest, so the number one clicked button on the website. And I mean, the consequence of that was also that there is more than 300% of sales opportunities that were identified additionally through chat, and also 180% more sales opportunities through calls. So it had impact straight away, not only in customer satisfaction, but also on cross and upselling opportunities. Really simple thing, right? So what do you do when you don't have visibility? Yeah, things like this. And there's plenty of more examples to share.
And I wonder, Stephan, if the next step for them isn't to kind of predict if the customer is going to click on the button instead of having the button. Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of companies are moving into this predictive analytics space. And if at some point, I have to say what's kind of the future of this, I think it's going to be companies becoming proactive, and that's unlocked by doing predictive analytics. Because a lot of things can be predicted these days. For instance, one of the recent developments that I've seen is that companies actually predicting what impact their actions are going to have on the customer. So when doing close the loop, you can actually have a recommendation system for your own actions. So if you know that the customer has complained about this and that, and their profile is this and that, you might actually get a suggestion about the best actions that you can take out of this. So if you have a choice between 10 different actions, you can actually know upfront which are the two that are going to have the highest impact on the customer. And by the same token, and also back to Sasha's point, you can actually predict a lot about customer experience and how customers feel and whether they're making value out of this or not. Again, as Stuart said, based on operational data, transactional data, all these kind of pieces, if you can mix them, if you can fuse them together, then it becomes really powerful because it unlocks predictions, and that allows you to go one step further. Instead of waiting for the customer to say something or to click a button or to leave feedback or to do whatever they do, you can actually do things on your own. And I've seen very good examples of this at Liberty Global, for example, who have been doing this in a number of their own markets, and I think with a very, very substantial financial impact. So from my perspective, it's all of these that also supports, I think, a lot of the actions an organization can take, and of course pinpointing what's kind of the financial impact of your actions, because the financial impact upfront in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I've heard many good things about the work that Gemseek is doing in this space, right? So I'm glad to hear the enthusiasm. And maybe to make it even more concrete, also to Sasha's point, non-response of surveys is not the end of the world, because surveys only make up for, let's say, 10% of the customer experience, and the other 90% is coming from other sources. The predictive analytics, right, that Ivo mentioned, the digital experience analytics that I said, but also what about all the recordings of your customers calling into the contact center? Are you really understanding every word they're saying? Are you really able to understand which topics they are discussing with you on the phone in a dashboard? What about SMS interactions with your customers, right, after key transaction moments? What about getting insights from stores where you're connecting with people, maybe in-store programs for people that couldn't find what they're looking for, or maybe that for people that are at the cash out desk, right, where they can fill in why they did a certain purchase, why they're happy. So there's many different ways of thinking about what can we do to just gain visibility.
I think it's so important to put yourself in the shoes of your customers and just sort of work back through their experience journey, and make sure that you've got some form of feedback at critical points to understand that and to see where the opportunities are. I always remember a great example. I think it was from IKEA. They were benchmarking themselves across their experience journey, and they'd got to a point where they weren't learning anything because they were the best in their field. But then they sort of looked at their customer journey differently, and they said, actually, before you enter the store, there's an inspiration phase. And then they realized that actually they shouldn't be benchmarking themselves on that part of the journey versus other retailers. Actually, where the inspiration was coming from were things like social platforms, like Instagram or Pinterest. And all of a sudden they realized they were really lacking. they weren't providing that critical point in a customer's journey where you can capture them. What is their experience around inspiration? And they actually found that they were lacking there. So they wouldn't have found that if they hadn't have put themselves in the shoes of the customer and really thought about what do they go through. And quite often companies, and it's because it's practical, you actually do it very much from an internal lens of how do you think the customer is using your product or going through the decision journey. And I'd say it's also the starting point is really to put yourself in the shoes of the customer and work your way back, because that's where you make those sorts of discoveries. And then you can build your whole customer experience program around it. And I think one of the questions also in the chat was about how do you get your company interested in this? And that's where I think, if you're in a company where you've got a problem with that, I think you've got to create that burning platform. You've got to quantify, as I said at the beginning of the discussion, how do you say, what's the cost of losing customers? Usually you can quantify that if you talk about that. And what is the value of potentially winning or expanding penetration with customers? And you can calculate, you can do a sort of back of the envelope exercise and create a monetary value. And normally that, if you put that in front of your exco colleagues, that should gain the attention. And then the next step of the journey is, well, how do you do that? Well, important part is the customer experience, and that hopefully should open the door for you. So.
There's some wonderful questions coming through. I have no idea how we're going to get to all of them. We will do our best, folks, but go ahead, Ivo.
Maybe to jump in on the last one, Stuart. So on the flip side, right, there's also very positive developments going on, right? If I do some research on the average enterprise company, right, so 1 billion revenue or more in Northern Europe, then to a very large extent, what I'm seeing is that the board payments or the board compensation is influenced by customer satisfaction or NPS or some kind of metric that represents the experience that the customers are having. And that, I mean, how do you include? There is a few questions in the chat that correlate to this answer, but they care because they're getting paid. They're being measured on it. They have to explain progress to shareholders, to owners of companies, right? So they do care. So I think that this also gives marketing or market and insight or all of us a purpose, right? Because we are here to help. We have a lot of knowledge, and that's for also the attendees, right, in this call, to really achieve, one of the most important company goals that you're seeing out there. So I think it's also about how do we all collectively tap into that mission, because what I'm seeing actually is that companies do care, board members do care, because it's one of the key KPIs that they own. But we're supposed to do more with it every day. That's my view.
Yeah, indeed. And I think to one of the questions, I think Stuart also hinted at this already, kind of translating these fairly abstract numbers, because at the end of the day, we share numbers. We say like 25% of the people think that and 35% think the other thing. And that's still fairly abstract. It doesn't mean a lot to people oftentimes, but translating into kind of a real story, I'm going to say, to an actual customer, human being, in 3D, flesh and blood and all that. And when I think people see the customer himself, listen to listen to a call with a customer or have the customer inside the room or read kind of their story, I think that actually does miracles for convincing people that customer experience is important. It's I think in a lot of ways very natural. 25% doesn't mean much, but when you see someone telling a story how they went to the shop and then they needed this kind of service and how the sales clerk helped them and all that, then it becomes really tangible, I think. And I think, Stephan, you do have in kind of this type of solution which gives you customer verbatim so that you can read them every day. And I think, Stuart, you also mentioned that you read verbatims yourself and attend to calls and all that. So I think one of the questions to creating this kind of culture is for companies people in companies not to sit on their desks the whole day, crunching numbers. I think it's more about go out and see how the customer uses the product and what do they do and where do they trip in the process and all of that. Sit together with them like in 3D. I think this kind of storytelling is going to be really critical in the future of our job as customer experience analytics company in a lot of ways. How do we convey the story from 25% to this very specific customer has a very specific problem and you need to care about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, one of the questions that's come through as well from Jonathan is very much about where do you start? How do you get going? And I think that's some of the things we talked about before the session began as well. So like, I'll just read it out for you, Jonathan. So where an organization does not have a primary research created profiles or personas, or even a feedback mechanism, what do you recommend as the first pragmatic action to get going?
I would say, I mean, but from a Medallia perspective, where I'm talking now, embrace the standard, because companies have been facing these challenges for more than 20 years, right? Medallia exists more than 20 years. And in the course of those years, there are standard roles and personas that we can support, right? Both from an internal perspective as from an external perspective. So it's really about embracing the standard in roles, but also the standards in closing the loop. Typically, in terms of channels, I'd say where we recommend to start differentiates, right? It depends on which KPIs you want to impact most. I mean, we've heard Stuart talk about retention. Some customers are aimed at transactional NPS. It depends, right? But generally, where we recommend to start is surveys and text analytics combined to really understand the verbatim of your customers and understand topics, and then do something with that, right? Close the loop. Put it on someone's desk, refer to the B2B account manager, refer to marketing to have them take the action. But it's really about embracing standards as well, and you'll be amazed by what's possible. So just get inspired with what's out there, and then see where you want to start, what makes most sense.
I'm probably gonna say get the lay of the land first. Kind of get the broader picture first. So try to do maybe something. It could be very traditional market research in that sense, in competitive context. You know, do an NPS, do competitive NPS or a brand research. Just understand where you do currently stand, where do your competitors stand. You know, get a very general view of, you know, whether you should be improving your product or your customer service or your order and delivery and stuff like that. Kind of, it's going to be a more strategic exercise, and in that sense probably not that actionable, as in everyone within the organization the very next day starts doing something. But I think it's going to give you a good guidance as to what to investigate next. And I think that's critical, because we don't want to jump to conclusions at the end of the day. I'm going to say, again, start with the lay of the land, and from there on you can always drill down into specific areas, do customer journey mapping and so on. And from there on you can do close the loop, where you actually get the engine running, and you start acting on customer by customer basis. And then comes the personalization, the kind of the predictive element at the end of the day. So I think this kind of flow from competitive research to strategic research to understand where do you stand, where are your competitors and so on, through this much more actionable one-to-one approach from closed loop programs to predictive analytics, which allow you to be proactive in your approach. I think that's basically the flow that I'm seeing in a lot of customers taking.
Yeah, I mean, I think if to the question that was posed, I mean, if you're just starting off, I'd say, you know, just informally make sure that you're talking to your customers and getting some feedback, no matter how. Just talk to them, even if it's a day, a month, or whatever, and make sure you're bringing that in and demonstrating that your customers have got something valuable to say, and you can demonstrate and say, look, if we do something with this, you know, we can do something good for our customers. And then I think, realizing that you're on a journey, this is a multi-year journey to build that up, to build the culture, to build the mechanisms, to build up the sophistication. And I think even to one of the other points that was posed, you know, sometimes things get passed on from one department to the other, and then there may be some silos. Yeah, I've also seen that. But then with sort of cloud-based systems, you can also create that transparency to show that at different points in the journey, and there are different teams involved, that everybody's working to that ultimate goal, which is the one customer experience, even though whether you're in, I don't know, you could be in engineering and service, you could be the key account manager, you could be in marketing, you could be in training, you know, all of these very, very different departments with very different functional goals are all adding to the customer experience. And I think it's our job, if you're in an insights or a customer experience team, it's how do you show that whole journey and show where the opportunity is to really lift it and do something positive for the customer. That's everything.
And I've seen at Philips at the Philips office that you have entire journeys printed and put on walls actually, so that people can see them every day. I hope I'm not giving up a secret here.
It's not a trade secret. No.
I just think it's a very good approach, because that's this kind of reminders. Obviously, leadership is super important, but also that kind of daily reminders about customers and what are they doing and what's important. So I think that's a brilliant approach.
Yeah.
I think what's also important, but what's implicit in what we all said, is that we shouldn't make it complex for the employees of our companies, right? So it is about this transparency. So we've heard Ivo talk about, we don't want to have siloed approaches or siloed tools or siloed processes. We want to create one view of the customer, which also means that there has to be some kind of common, let's say, process or common tool, whichever tool that might be, because it simplifies. Imagine that you're supposed to do your research in different tools that all correspond to a different part of a customer journey, or to a different country, or to, you can imagine that this becomes very complex, right? So the simplicity of understanding which customer signals you want to capture, which customer moments are really impactful in a customer journey, and how do you pull the visibility into your voice of the customer approach? That's really key, right? Because just don't start anywhere, but make sure that you also have this end picture, to Ivo's point, in mind, because you want to be able to add more and more visibility into your let's say your paradigm, one step at a time, without needing to go into a separate environment or to go into a separate database. You have to be able to see it all, right? And just thinking about this end picture before starting, I think, is really important. Otherwise, it becomes really complex really fast.
Yeah. There's one other thought I had on this topic. I think the importance of sort of micro feedback, I'd call it. Every customer has got something valuable to say, and sometimes it might be fairly superficial, but sometimes it may be just one customer that gives you an insight that you haven't thought about. Now, quite often companies are very good at sort of diluting and averaging out to a very superficial level of customer experience. But sometimes it's those individuals that you might pick up who want to give you feedback. Listen to them. You'll find some real diamonds of insights. They've got something really valuable to say. Now, it might be that there may be only one or two of them that are coming through, but what you can do is use that to source ideas and then test it further, and to say, well, hey, if we did this, how would you like that? Because quite often customers don't always come up with everything that they need. They just accept the status quo. And so this is why I say that the power of sort of micro feedback is important. Every voice counts. And just to give you an example, I mean, just in the last week here in the Netherlands, there's a chain of supermarkets called Jumbo. They've actually introduced the slow till cash out. And this came from customer feedback. And of course, what do you do as a grocery retailer? I mean, you're there to distribute food and product. And for years, it's just been the one size fits all. But recently, you see many different formats, whether it's online, different, inner city, smaller formats, large scale formats, with different assortments. But now you also have self-checkout. But Jumbo Supermarkets found that there was a cohort of customers that actually like social interaction with a cashier as they're queuing and going through. So they've actually dedicated some of their tills to slow checkout to facilitate social contact. And that comes from customer feedback. And I think that's a tremendous idea, where sort of a small group of cohorts, they've listened to them and they've put in action something that's very relevant for them. Not relevant for everybody, But again, it's about acting on customer feedback and listening to everybody, and then testing some of those more novel ideas with a group to see if it's going to appeal to a sizable cohort of your own customer base as well. So.
I love that point, Stuart, and I think a lot of that comes from text analytics, really, and from what people say in their own words. To add one example, we have a client in Germany, the sports retail company. So they closed one of their best shops to do renovation. Once they reopened the shop, the sales went down, which was really odd because at the end of the day, it's a renovated shop. So what we did is they have an NPS survey that they on tablets when you exit the store, so you can leave your feedback. So when we dig deeper, we found out that in the fitting rooms, the curtains were just a little bit shorter than before. So people were a little bit embarrassed to actually try a lot of new stuff, which prevented them from buying stuff. And it wasn't a lot of people who actually said that, exactly to your point, because who's gonna say that in a survey? But that was actually a huge reason for their sales going down. And we would have never known that unless we, listen to people really and dig into the text feedback that they're sharing.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's the analogy of if you were running a restaurant and one client said, hey, I'm not very happy with the food, my soup was cold or something. Would you ever turn around to them and say, you're not statistically relevant?
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't. You'd say, oh, crikey, maybe the chef hadn't turned the gas on the stove or something and heated up the, you want to listen to every bit of feedback and understand, well, what caused that? Is it systemic of a bigger issue? The chef didn't turn on the gas on the cooking stove or something, and we've just been serving cold soup. Whatever it might be, you've just got to be obsessed with understanding, well, why did our customer say that? What was that? And then thinking forward about, okay, is this going to affect a larger group of our customers? What do we do about that? Getting that feedback into action.
And again, to the power of kind of this spontaneous and text feedback, it's also, you can actually use it for a ton of stuff. But one of the recent examples that we've done is to identify vulnerable customers. And I think that's also for customer experience going for the kind of the broader good, if you will. Because oftentimes people go through a lot of different difficulties. Basically, some people are lonely, as the example that Stuart said. Other people, go through a divorce or health issues, whatever it is. And these people have a very different experience, I think. And it's interestingly, it kind of shows in the language that they use, and that can actually be used to improve their own feedback. And I think we don't oftentimes think about vulnerabilities and customers as being vulnerable. We think of them as, being very rational and going after their own good and stuff like that. But the reality is not like that. People are stressed out at work, and they have they're facing different adversities and so on. And I think as customer experience leaders, I think we can also have a say to that as well. Really improving people's lives.
Yeah.
I think there's also questions around this topic that relate to it, right? So there's questions around how do you deal with Dutch people not easily giving 9s or 10s. But I think the discussion that we're having actually also ties into that, right? Because it's not. So first of all, it's you always measure the experience per market and not over the world, right? Because maybe Dutch people are more likely to give a lower score. Maybe Americans are likely to give a higher score. And you don't want to blend that, right? You're always doing the comparisons within one market with the competitors, right? So higher or low is relative, right? So it's always about how do we compete. Secondly, what Stuart and Eva, I think, have been discussing is also about what can we improve, right? What are the important topics, the important nuggets of feedback that can help us to navigate this experience score upwards, right? And why? Because then it's not so much about giving a 9 or a 10, but it's about being better than a competitor, about having a higher score, about making your products, brands, services, whatever, more loved than any other, right? So that's really what it's about. So it's about the insights to improve so that you can take action. And I think that's, if you tie that into also other questions that are on the chat, like B2C, B2B scenarios or manufacturing questions right in the chat, I think the concept of collecting insights, doing something with it to improve compared to others in the same market, is different with B2C and B2B, right? Because with B2C, you might have much more engagement through websites, through apps, through web shops, etc., right? And maybe social media. So those then would be the touch points that you want to get insight in, right? So what are customers thinking that are on the website? What are they writing in terms of actionable feedback that I can do something with on social media? How can I collect that across the different platforms? But if you think about B2B, typically maybe integration with Salesforce is much more important, or with a CRM system, or because that's where you're interacting, right? Through account managers with big customers that represent a lot of revenue per customer. So the channels are different, but also the way of closing the loop is different, because maybe with a B2B setting, you might close the loop, you might take action through the B2B account manager, and that person needs to be empowered, right, within the program to take action and to do what's best. But in a B2C setting, it might be someone from the customer service reaching out and saying, maybe in the sports example of you, Ivo, like, oh, the box, the shoe box was wet. You know what? We'll send you a new shoe. But it doesn't have to be a B2B account manager, right? So the channels, but also the way that you analyze and you act upon it, and through which people, that's different. Maybe, yeah, what's your view, maybe Stuart, on because Philips is mostly doing B2B, right? What do you think are key differences?
No,
just a quick one on that, Stuart. We're in our final 2 minutes. Just to be mindful of time. So I would like to just David, you turned your camera on there. If you have just a quick question, then we'll get some final thoughts, if that's okay from everybody. David, you're okay? Yeah, so with mindful of time, I would just want to make sure we finish on time. We could go on all day, I know. But is there any final thoughts from anyone? Maybe Stuart?
Yeah, I mean, we do consumer and B2B, and on the consumer side, we also just make sure our teams have access to the data, and you empower your teams. So, I mean, in the past, I remember some of the interactions from our care staff with consumers. It really enabled them to be focused on giving great service to people calling any of our touch points, whether it's via the web or via a service line, and just make sure that you're not afraid. Don't hide the data. Just make sure that unadulterated, honest customer feedback is getting into the hands of people that can do something about it, and then they can act on it. I think that's the most important thing.
Mark, can I make a very quick suggestion here, because I see a lot of questions. Can we maybe continue the discussion offline, in the sense that when we collect all the questions, we can prepare some very short answers, and then I'm sure Stuart and Stephan as well, happy to engage after that, exchange ideas, because I would also love to hear from the more than 80 people in this call as well.
Definitely, we can do that. Yeah, I'm just conscious of people getting the meetings in the morning and things like that. So we will collate all that information, and then we can get back to everybody with the recording as well. So we can do that post session. Ivo, absolutely.
And maybe one other thing, right? Please also feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, right? And we'd be happy to also maybe have discussions, as Ivo said, as a follow-up, maybe even one-on-one, right? So please don't be shy. Just reach out, and we'll be happy to help.
Yes, Stephan, we'll include that as well. So we'll include the LinkedIn profiles of each of you within the email. So we'll do that, certainly.
Perfect.
All right, excellent. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a great day. We'll be in touch very soon. And Stuart, Stephan, Ivo, I really appreciate it. As I said, I could have gone on all day, I think, but excellent questions from the audience as well. But we will be in touch very soon.
This was fun. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day ahead.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Cheers,
everybody.
bye.